Well, welcome to our What's the Point conversations. Recently, we sat down with a few people who are part of Mosaic to talk specifically about what's the point of singleness, and what's the point of dating, and what's the point of marriage. Our hope at Mosaic is to have open conversations about relevant topics so that we can sharpen one another, so that we can learn from each other, so that this Mosaic family can grow stronger together as we follow Jesus. And at the end of this short video, we've provided some questions to hopefully catalyze your own conversations about these topics with other people that are a part of Mosaic. It is our hope that we can get fresh revelation from God together so that we can grow stronger and so that we can run after God's purposes for singleness, for dating, and for marriage. I hope you have a great time with this resource. God has a powerful point for dating because God cares about people's hearts. Proverbs 4:23 tells us to keep our heart with all diligence, for from it flows the springs of life. God cares about our hearts. And so whether we're dating right now and we need to be inspired in God's point to keep our heart, or whether we're in a community where people are dating and we need to be protectors of people's hearts together, God has a point for each one of us in dating.
Don't mind, Bobby. It's okay with me.
Yeah, I know all of your dating histories. I did some research beforehand, so I know kind of which direction to go. Are we good?
We are
ready, Corlin? Oh, awesome. So, Tori, what is God's point for dating?
So I would like to answer that in a way that is what is not God's point for dating. When I was an adolescent, the kind of courtship thing was really coming alive in Christian circles. And when I started being more of a dating age, that was kind of something I was interested in. And then, I thought surely God would honor the marriages of people who were like so pure, so intentional in how they pursued one another. And then on the flip side, I also, I did end up dating, but I also had this belief that if you dated too much, like if you never had a season of singleness, surely God would make you be single before he let you meet your true love, your soulmate. And I had a girlfriend who was a Christian, but she dated, from junior high all through, didn't have any gaps, and I was just so sure God was going to, have to teach her something about being singleness or being single. And so, since that time period, I have seen, unfortunately, some of those couples who courted are no longer married. And I also, my girlfriend who dated a lot, she ended up getting married with no season of singleness. But actually, one of the people that she went on a couple dates with was my now husband. And so now I met him through her. So anyway, I feel like I've been humbled in that way. And I just feel like dating is not this like season where God's trying to trick you until you behave a certain way. And so I think God showed me that he wasn't just dangling this carrot and if I'd only behave a certain way. So
that's good.
Yeah. Dawn, what would you add to that? What's God's point for dating?
For us, when we were dating in high school, we weren't even saved yet. So my perspective on this answer is a little bit more from the place of a parent than actually going through it. Our children are all married and went through a season of dating. And when they were growing up, we talked to them about the purpose for dating is to find your spouse. So if you are not old enough to be thinking about getting married, you're probably not old enough to be thinking about dating. And And I think when you talk to kids about that from early in life, it makes sense to them. And we really encourage them to have friends of the opposite sex and to do things in groups, because we weren't trying to isolate them, but we also really didn't want them to give their heart away too soon. And we had somebody in our circle that talked about the cycle of dating and breaking up as practice for divorce. And I thought, wow, yeah, that's kind of a big statement, and that's really true. So I really agree that there isn't one way to do it. I think in each culture, in each family, in each period of time, there's going to be different processes. But the goal is that you're not there just using somebody else's heart to make you feel good or to meet a need in you, but that you're coming into a dating relationship when you're ready to try and figure out who it is you should be marrying. And it's an important message, even, I think, more so for men than for women. And if you don't mind me saying, pick on them a little bit, because men have a lot more options. And I had the opportunity one time to sit down with a really wonderful guy who I love, who he's in his 30s, and he's like my kid's age. And he had been dating a woman, he's a believer, for a year and a half, and he had no intention of marrying her. And I said, stop it. You need to break up with her. You are wasting her life and her time and her opportunities, because 5 years from now, when you're ready and you're 37, you're going to be able to date anybody all the way down to 20. Nobody's going to say anything to you. She's 37. What opportunities is she going to have? And so I think it's important to think about your own motivations in dating and how what you're doing is impacting the people that you're involved with.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bubby, what would you add to that?
I think right on. If you're like, if marriage is nowhere on the horizon, then you shouldn't be dating someone or that person, or age-wise, if marriage is not something that, if it's not anywhere in the near future, maybe just postpone dating until marriage is somewhere in the foreseeable future.
That's great. So, Mark, Dawn mentioned that you've had some children go through dating, and you've seen people go through dating relationships. Where have you seen people thriving? What have you seen people doing inside of dating that has really helped them to find God's purpose?
Yeah, I think it all starts with really knowing where your boundaries are. Too many of our young people, I think, these days they're in our culture, which is so defined by the pressure to perform in a certain way and take part in a certain way, and just not really necessarily understanding exactly how Jesus would have them live their lives in the context and boundaries that believers should have. And that isn't just in one part of life, it cuts all the way across your entire life, including your dating life. And so when we've seen young people thrive, and we've seen people that are dating really thrive, it's when they know that their lives are guarded and cared for and governed and led by the boundaries that God puts over your lives. And I think about some of the statistics, and social scientists will tell us that, and the church will tell us that when they do surveys of people in and outside the church, there really isn't a whole lot of difference statistically between the behaviors that they see of believers relative to dating, sleeping together, living together, divorce, marriage, all those things. There's very little difference. And culturally, we've got to help our young people especially, but anybody who's in a dating relationship, understand what are some really good, healthy boundaries. And if we can help people set those up in their lives, it'll position them really well, not only for the dating life, but for a lot of other things as well.
So great. Yeah, really good. Tori, what would you add what would lead to thriving in the season of dating?
Well, I personally found dating exhausting and not fun. And I know I'm not alone in that. And eventually I got so tired of dating that I decided I was only going to date on referral. And that's how I found Tristan. And so I think that there's a way to thrive while dating that kind of has other people doing the work for you. and then knowing your heart, knowing your character, asking certain people you love and trust to, set you up. And then, their heart, they know your heart, and sometimes it works out. And actually, Tristan, my husband's parents, and my parents also both kind of didn't really date. They just kind of were set up, and so it's just interesting.
So I hear clear boundaries being important, which includes, I think, just the vision for the why and what, and then I hear community is what you're saying. Bubby, what would you add? What would help dating to thrive?
Okay, can I be very clear?
Yeah, be clear.
Okay, great. I just heard this in a message recently, and so I'm going to share this because I think it's really helpful. I shared it with a bunch of college students, and they all said, wow, it's really helpful. And they remembered it with me saying it one time. Are you ready? 5 S's. In dating, these are your boundaries. If you want boundaries, clear boundaries. No sex, no skin in places where there shouldn't be. No sleeping, no simulation, no stimulation. There you go. I'll kind of leave those there. I think talking very clearly is helpful for people. Sometimes there's some ambiguity, like, okay, what does he really mean when he says that? Like, what? So being abundantly clear, and then being really clear within your relationship. Especially guys take the lead in this, but setting those boundaries. And also being clear in what stage your relationship is in. We are dating. Will you be my girlfriend? I think that this relation should be over. Phrases like that aren't ambiguous, and you don't keep texting even though the relationship's over, but just be clear. Be abundantly clear.
Yeah. It's really good, and I think some of what's coming out in talking about thriving are some of the challenges. So many challenges for people trying to date right now. So what challenges have you experienced, or what challenges are you seeing in dating today? Dawn, why don't you help get us started?
Wow. That's a little bit hard for me to answer because all of my kids have been married a long time now. So I'm throwing back to pre-COVID days on this answer. I think the hard thing is in the current climate, people share a lot about their personal life. Their inner world is broadcast because of social media. And so it can be hard to know where the boundaries are for people on what is genuine about who they are internally. And also you can feel that you're quickly at a place of intimacy, emotional intimacy with someone because of the amount that is being shared. And I think it's important what Bubby said, to have those boundaries and to also, keep your powder dry a little bit. Like, you don't need to share absolutely everything about your life when you first meet somebody, and allow a relationship to progress. And I think that is a challenge for the younger generation at the moment because everything's all out there. You can look back on somebody's Facebook or their Instagram for how many years and see all the relationships they were in or what they think about things, and a lot of people are going to do that ahead of time. So there isn't this opportunity for the unfolding. And so I think that's important in getting to know each other. And I so agree about the challenge of community. One of the things that I was thinking about is what we're talking about here is making sure that this is somebody that you want to spend your life with. Most of that happens with other people around. Right. It's pretty easy to kind of, find somebody that you have chemistry with. Fabulous, great. But that's not enough. There has to be, how do they treat their friends and family? How do they interact with people around you? Do they step on your toes all the time, or do they encourage you? What's going on in the community relationships? And I think that's been a challenge in recent times for people too. There's no opportunities for community right now. Or limited.
If I could add, we talk about thriving in the context of dating and relationships, and it's really important to know not only, and as much as I appreciate the boundaries we've been talking about and all the things that we think people who are dating shouldn't do, it's important to really understand also what should they do. It's not all a bunch of no's in dating, right? We go all the way back to Genesis and we see that God made them in order to complement one another. And so God's given each of us a unique set of giftings, a personality, a set of ways of communicating and relating and just contributing in the kingdom and doing all kinds of different things. And so finding the person that can really get you and really know you and really help in that community context that Don was just talking about, understand how to improve the way that you relate to people and where you minister in a group, not one-on-one, but just honing your relational skills, honing your ability to kind of be a better man or woman, honing your ability to be a better husband or wife in the future, just using your community and using the input from the people around you. All those are things that you can improve just to be a better believer and person in general. But it isn't always about the no's. It's always thriving. It's sometimes about just making taking the opportunity and giving God the opportunity to shape you into someone that you really need to walk as to be successful in the calling He's put on your life.
That's great. Yeah, that's great, Mark. Bubby, what are some challenges out there in dating land?
The idea of being equally yoked, I think, is an interesting one, and maybe like, what does that really mean to be equally yoked? As 1 Corinthians 6 or 7, where Paul talks about that, and what does that mean to be equally yoked? Like, I guess the simplest way I would think about that is, do you both have a somewhat matching level of passion for Jesus and following Him? And what I see as I look back at my dating relationship with my now wife is that there was mutual challenge in each of us, that there are ways that Ari, who is now my wife, that she challenged me to love God more and follow Him more, and there were ways that I challenged her to love God and follow God more in different ways, different things, but the idea of being mutually challenging the other mutually to grow in your walks with God, and letting that be a question that you ask yourself is, does this person challenge me in some way, shape, or form to love God more and want to follow Him more closely?
Yeah. Why does that matter? Why does it matter
To be equally yoked.
And I know people ask this question, why does it matter that I'm dating someone that has the same beliefs as I do about Jesus, or even the same level of passion for Jesus? Like, why does it even matter?
Because you're going to become one with this person. Nobody will affect your life more than this person, and vice versa. And you're going to become one with them. And I heard someone describe it as being an ox pulling you're being yoked with someone else, you're connected to them. If you've got a big ox and a little ox, eventually you're going to slow down to the pace of the little ox. And being equally yoked, it takes a humble, realistic look at yourself, but also being willing to be honest about where the other person is in their relationship with God. But yeah, because you're going towards becoming one, it totally matters.
So, Tori, somebody comes to you and they are a Christian and they are interested in dating a person who's not a Christian. What would you say to them?
I've been there. I did date an unbeliever who, when we started dating, he was Catholic, and then, which wasn't ideal just because I'm not Catholic, so we were already not on the same page about some stuff. But then, as the relationship progressed, he became less and less religiously inclined, I guess I would say, until he said he's pretty much like an atheist. But we still stayed together because by that point we were attached. I mean, it was not a godly relationship. So I was tied to him, and so it was very difficult to separate myself. And so I have a lot of compassion for people who are stuck or feel stuck. I know what that's like to feel stuck, and I had to pray for months to asked the Lord to like change my heart and like enable me to get out of this, because I really felt trapped. So if someone's not yet trapped, though, I would implore them to not get yourself trapped, because it does reach a point where it becomes unignorable. And you know, if you have a walk with the Lord that's bearing fruit, and that the Lord is truly a focus, then it will reach a point where you are really hurting. It's not a good situation. But for those who are already in those relationships, you know, it's not like they're doomed forever. I think that there's ways, and I'm not the expert on it, but I know that there's ways to walk as a godly husband or wife, even if you're with an unbelieving spouse. So it wouldn't be, I don't want to just, you know, cast doom over people that are already in that situation. But if you're not yet in that situation, it's not fun.
Yeah. So what? Oh, please.
Our marriage verse, and if we're looking at dating as, you know, leading to marriage, hopefully, was something that I think really addresses the being yoked equally part, and that is in Ephesians 2. It says, Philippians 2. It says that when we are when we maintain the same love, when we're united in spirit, when we're intent on one purpose, you know, we make God's joy complete. And that ability to be focused and sort of going in the same direction, addressing the same purposes, growing the same love, being in unity together is what really makes God's joy complete. And it makes your marriage, your relationship, which you're building toward as dating, a lot more complete as well. And so there's great value in doing it in a way where you're equally yoked.
I have something on that too. I think it's difficult enough to maintain unity when you are aiming for the same thing, right? That was our marriage verse, because God has a really good sense of humor, because it was maintaining the same love, intent on one purpose, and having one mind. And we have got two individuals with strong minds. And the fact that our purpose was the same and our love was the same because it was coming from Jesus is the thing that holds us together when our minds are at odds. And I think if you don't have the foundation of having the same confidence that God is the one who is able to keep you together, and He's the one who's able to resolve your differences, and He's the place that we run to when things are hard, there's not a lot of hope of getting through that. Apart from that. So just like Tori said, if you're already in that situation, the Lord will meet you there. It's not hopeless. But when you're making those decisions to start out, don't start out with the disadvantage of the lack of common ground in the Lord, because you're going to need Him. Yeah. You are. So.
It's really good. I want to just circle back to something that we went through quickly, and that is that the point of dating is to lead to marriage. And I just want to ask again, what if someone said, well, hey, I just want to date for fun, and myself and this other person, we're just going to do it for fun. Like, is that okay? Like, how would you think about dating for fun? Is there such a thing? What would you say to that? Bubby, what would you say to that?
I think that was my perspective of dating at a point in my life, and that it didn't yield good fruit. It didn't lead to good things in my life. Proverbs 4:23, it talks about guarding your heart above all else, for from it flow the springs of life. But that when you're dating someone, you're really getting your heart connected to them, even if you think you're not. My heart was getting connected to some of the people I dated, and wasn't, marriage was not anywhere on the horizon, and that I was just creating pain for myself and for the other person, and
It's good, yeah. Anyone add something to that? Mark?
God has a purpose for your life, and that includes your spouse, whoever that is. And when you're 20, 25, 30, whatever it is, before you're married, you don't know who that person is. So potentially, you're dating for fun someone else's wife. And you know, when you look at it that way, you look at it in a way where you're trying to go in a direction that will lead to a godly relationship at some point, but you're just having a little bit of fun along the way. You're creating a whole bunch of heartache with someone who isn't your wife and who will probably be someone else's. At least as a guy, that's the perspective. And when we were younger, we heard this illustration I think is really important, is, you know, if you look at your life as kind of, take two strips of packing tape that you would use to ship a box somewhere, and take them and put them together, sticky side together, and then now try and take them apart. So it's really fun until you break up. And then you break up. So now try and rip those pieces of tape apart, and you won't do it very cleanly. There'll be bits, it'll be a mess, bits on both sides. And now let's go and tack them together with two other pieces. And as people, we leave pieces of ourselves in every relationship when we go through the fun parts of dating and breaking up. And I don't want it to sound negative, but it's really important. You know, we have to be building strong habits in relationships, because otherwise we're going to leave little pieces of ourselves behind on one another in every relationship where there's a bonding and a breaking. And like Bubby said, you just don't want to practice in that way and create stress and hang-ups for yourself or the other person.
Really great. So last question, I'd love to hear from each of you. Like, what advice would you give? Like here, either think of it as speaking to yourself when you are dating, or think of it as speaking to just a group of people in Mosaic or in our city who are dating or thinking about dating. Like, what would you give? Like, unfiltered, what advice would you give to that person? Dawn, can we start with you?
Sure, yeah. I think women in general have a tendency to project the best thing forward, and that can get us into trouble. So my advice to women who are deciding who to date or how serious they want to be with someone is to really look at the core of who that person is. It's not enough how you feel about them. It's not enough to be attracted to them. Who are they at the core? And are there enough of those core values that align with yours? And if you don't know what yours are, you shouldn't be dating. So first sort out yourself, figure out what God is doing with you. If you have come into your adulthood with some brokenness, like most of us do, please ask the Holy Spirit into that and get that sorted out before you try and date, because now you're gonna have brokenness and that makes it messy. But the main thing is be realistic, and you hear all the time people say, well, don't marry somebody with the idea that you're gonna change them. So true. But also, don't marry someone with the idea that they are not going to change, or that you are not going to change, because you are. So who they are at the core, if those things are aligned, then you're going to manage all of those other changes through life in a way that there is a commonality and there will be a foundation to go forward from. So be realistic, know who you are, and know who the other person is, really, not just that you think they're cute. It's not enough.
So good. Thanks, Dawn. Who's next?
So, I am a person who I really struggled. I think while I wanted to date with the intention of marriage, and all my dating was, theoretically with marriage in mind, I had a lot of challenges being motivated to date in a way that honored the Lord or that aligned with Scripture, or it just was really hard for me to feel motivated. Like, people would talk to me about, oh, you're leaving your heart with some, and now that I'm married, I know that's true, but when you're still living in the before, not the after, it's hard to get motivated, or it can be. And so I would say, if you are one of those people who, just kind of find yourself towing the line or crossing the line or not wanting to do what aligns with Scripture, I would say, In addition to, of course, praying about that, like surround yourself with people who have done it or are doing it right. Because when I think back on when I've dated well and when I have not dated well, a lot of it had to do with what was normalized around me. And, accountability matters. And so if I am, if I'm living in a group of girls, with a group of girls, they're going to know if I'm spending the night at my boyfriend's house. Or if I'm in a life group where people are invested in me, they're going to, I'm seeing other couples in front of me who are modeling what to do and hearing how they did it. But, there's also just that added layer of protection of like, hey, help yourself do better if you can't help yourself do better.
I'd say wherever you're at in dating, pre-dating, or not dating yet, or you're dating and maybe it's not going well, or you're dating and it's going great, there's hope that it can change now if it hasn't been going well, and if it is going well, then great, keep on keeping on, but there's hope now for your dating life, that you can find renewed hope today. And then also just community. Do it with people. Like, get people involved in your life. The times in my life where there was a dating relationship where as soon as we broke up, everybody was like, whew, that was weird. Why were you two dating? That was strange. And I was like, why didn't you tell me this? My friends and family. And I was like, what's going on? So, but then later on, relationships where people would speak into it and tell us how it seemed from the outside, and it just was a lot healthier when we had friends that knew both of us and knew us individually. So, community.
Great.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you guys have said here. Getting your stuff sorted out first. And doing it in community is really important. I think the last thing I would just add is just remember Jesus goes with you in everything. Yeah. Everything, including your dating life. And that's not a negative thing, it's a positive thing. It can really be very beneficial to get the direction and counsel and help of the Holy Spirit when you're working through things and you're not exactly sure how to respond to people that you might or might not be interested in romantically. Just invite Jesus into the situation. It'll be really clear. And God wants you to have good relationships. He wants you to have eventually a strong marriage. He wants you to be positioned for success. And so he's going to help you if you just don't draw a line and sort of say, well, everywhere but here, Jesus. Just let Jesus into the whole thing, the whole person, and it'll be great.
It's really good. So, what do we think about arranged marriages? I'm just kidding. We're all done. That's great.
I'm into it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And there's so much more still for us to talk about. That's why in just a minute, we're going to put some questions on the screen. And our hope is that you, as a group or whoever you're with, can sit and use those questions to dive deeper into this topic. For the purpose of this conversation, I just want to give us some handrails. We're talking about singleness and dating and marriage using the definition that God gives us for marriage. Although these are important conversations, today we're not talking about homosexuality, we're not talking about gender identity, we're not talking about polygamy. We're talking about God's point for singleness, dating, and marriage within God's definition for marriage. God defines marriage in the Bible as one man and one woman entering a covenant relationship that's intended for a lifetime. And there is so much that we have yet to learn and to grow in just understanding and running after God's point for God's definition of marriage. So those are the handrails we're using. Hopefully that can narrow in the conversation so that it can be most helpful and fruitful for all of us. I hope you have a great time learning from one another and sharing with each other. And my prayer is that this leads to growth and depth and hope as we run after God's purposes together. We'll put those questions up for you right now.